Thomas Sankara is an inseparable name from revolutionary minds and liberation fighters in Africa, especially when considering Burkina Faso. However, an untimely and tragic end cut short his life and legacy. It was not by external forces, but by the very man who had been his close ally and friend. Blaise Compaore will forever be remembered as the man who betrayed a revolutionary icon. The story of their betrayal begins on that fateful day, October 15, 1987. He wasn't just Sankara's comrade in arms, but also his close friend, who had a bond that had been forged during the tumultuous times of revolutionary change in Burkina Faso. When you think about Compaoré's journey from a small town near Ouagadougou to the corridors of power, it is an intriguing tale. Born into a Mossi family, one of the dominant ethnic groups in Upper Volta, now Burkina Faso, his military career began to take shape after he attended a military college in Yaoundé, Cameroon, and received para-commando training in Rabat, Morocco. He served in the Upper Volta para-commando regiment from 1978 to 1981, initially as the head of a section and later as a company commander. However, it wasn't until 1981 that his role in national politics began to gain momentum when he took charge of the National Commando Training Center at Po. The turning point in his political journey occurred in 1982 when his friend and colleague, Captain Thomas Sankara, left his government position in protest of certain policy decisions. A year later, when Sankara was imprisoned during another power struggle, Compaoré decided to take matters into his own hands. With support from the commando unit at Po and assistance from Ghana and Libya, he led a coup on August 4, 1983, which placed Sankara at the helm of the state. This coup didn't involve only Compaoré and Sankara, but also two other military officers, Commandant Jean-Baptiste Lingani and Captain Henry Zongo. Together, they orchestrated the coup and subsequently established the new regime. Each of them assumed leadership positions within the country. Compaoré held the position of Minister of State at the presidency from 1983 to 1987, the early days of the regime, making him effectively the second in command. He also took on the role of the Minister of State for Justice from 1985 to 1987. He seemed content to remain in the background, allowing the more charismatic Sankara and the other coup organizers to handle the public aspects of politics in the newly named Burkina Faso during that period. However, things changed in 1987 when disagreements over security and strategic matters led to a significant shift in the political landscape. On October 15, Compaoré, Zongo, and Lingani led a coup that brought him to power. Tragically, Sankara was killed during this takeover, and Compaoré, who claimed not to have planned the coup well in advance, was deeply affected by the unexpected loss of his friend. Sankara was in the midst of a radical transformation of his country, which he had renamed from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meaning land of upright people, on the day of the coup. President Thomas Sankara presided over a crucial meeting with his special cabinet when it happened at 4 p.m. that day. The agenda included a report from an advisor who had returned from Cotonou after meetings with the Revolutionary People's Party of Benin. However, the meeting became tragic when at 4:35 p.m., unidentified assailants, driving a car with a malfunctioning exhaust, stormed the meeting venue. Chaos erupted as gunshots rang out, and President Sankara, who had grabbed his own gun, left the room with his hands in the air, hoping to have a word out with the intruders, but was shot just moments after stepping outside, marking the end of a promising leader's life and a pivotal moment in Burkina Faso's history. Blaise Compaoré seized power and initiated a reign that lasted for 27 long years. This period was characterized by a complete detour from Sankara's ideals. Compaoré was seen as reversing many of the progressive policies that had been implemented during Sankara's presidency. Corruption crept back into the system, and the country's economy faltered. The man who had once been content to stay in the shadows was now thrust into the spotlight, and his leadership would shape the nation's destiny for years to come. Sankara's legacy was systematically erased during Compaoré's rule. His image was removed from public spaces, and his name was hardly mentioned. It was a dark period for Burkina Faso, and those who remembered the hope and promise of the Sankara years couldn't help but wonder what might have been. After seizing power, Compaoré faced the daunting challenge of shedding his reputation as Sankara's alleged murderer, a figure who had garnered significant support across Western Africa. In the 1990s, he was also accused of involvement in civil conflicts in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Angola. Despite this dark past, he managed to transform into a respected regional leader, often mediating disputes in other Western African nations. He assumed leadership roles in various regional bodies, including the Organization of African Unity, predecessor to the African Union, the Economic Community of West African States, and the West African Economic and Monetary Union. In addition to election boycotts, Compaoré faced other controversies and popular uprisings in 1991 and 1998. Disputes over his eligibility to run in the 2005 election emerged as opposition parties argued that a constitutional amendment in 2000 limited a president's term to 5 years, renewable only once. Compaoré, having already served 2 terms, contended that the law couldn't be applied retroactively, a stance upheld by the country's Constitutional Council. His rule also saw periodic unrest triggered by the suspicious death of Norbert Zongo, a prominent journalist critical of Compaoré's administration. Public dissatisfaction with political and economic developments led to protests, including notable ones in 2006, 2008, and an unprecedented level of unrest in 2011. However, the most significant challenge to his 27-year rule came in October 2014, when a plan to abolish presidential term limits by amending the Constitution was announced. This move would potentially allow Compaoré to serve additional terms as president. In response, Burkinabés took to the streets en masse, staging protests against the proposed amendment. On October 30, the protests escalated into violence, with demonstrators setting fire to public buildings, including the National Assembly. This led to his resignation. Justice finally caught up with Blaise Compaore and his co-conspirators after 34 long years. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they did turn. In 2022, the courts tried and found Compaoré and others involved in the coup guilty of the murder of Thomas Sankara. He received a life sentence. This verdict marked a bittersweet moment for those who had waited for justice for decades. Following the trial, Blaise Compaoré, who had gone into exile in Ivory Coast during the tumultuous period that followed his resignation in 2014, continued to reside there. Ivory Coast, under the protection of a French-backed government, became his safe haven. He's living in exile, far away from the country he had ruled with an iron fist for nearly 3 decades. His presence in Ivory Coast remains a contentious issue, with many in Burkina Faso and across Africa calling for his extradition to face justice for the crimes he is found guilty of. The man who betrayed Thomas Sankara may have had his moment of power and control, but history will forever remember him as the one who extinguished the flame of a revolutionary, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts of those who continue to honor Sankara's memory and ideals, while asking themselves if power was really worth the betrayal. We have come to the end of this video. If you found it insightful, do well to like it and subscribe to the New Tourist channel. Do not forget to turn on notifications so you keep getting first-hand information like this on underrated stories in history. Thanks for watching, and see you in our next video.